James having asparagus and potato fried up with some garlic, and he might have some Szechuan on that. We're going to be talking about Law and Order, and well, I'll just show you those things really quickly. So, as far as I'm concerned, this 7th year, is that right? Got top of the stack. Very entertaining. I don't have a remote with my DVD player, so I couldn't watch Birth of the Blues. I could only watch Blue Skies. But it was entertaining. Agatha Christie's Poirot, Hickory Dickory Dock. Entertaining. But that's how I rated them, from top to bottom. And you wouldn't think that, but I wouldn't have thought it, but there we go. Biochemistry and molecular biology, how life works. I'll be talking about this for the next little while because I've
been watching it for the
going
last
through it, right? So I just wanted to mention asparagus. And if you borrow this, if you're an Alberta citizen, then you can borrow this from the Alberta Public Library.
It's just called the Alberta Public Library.
I don't know what it's called, but it's what it is like this one comes out of Edmonton, and most of them do. But they can come. You can borrow them from your local public library in Alberta, and they ship them in.
It's like an interlibrary loan.
Yeah. So, Law and Order.
First
Season
in order.
7, 1996 to 1997. Very entertaining. It's hard for me to pick. James likes the part with the lawyer the best. He says, oh, it's all about that. But it's not all about that. That's about half of it. And sometimes, like he said, is it like half the show, the police guys, and then half, and I said, well, it depends on the show.
So that's how little I've seen it, really.
Yeah, sometimes you're not going to put the Szechuan on there. I thought you wanted it on there. It's fine without?
I'm going to put it on the asparagus.
Oh.
The way she's cooked these, I thanked her for the I already seen the asparagus, but the potatoes. She said, oh, it's just potatoes, but it's got, what did you fry them with? Some sort of
taco
oil, right?
seasoning.
Wow.
No oil.
Yeah.
I put water, so it's sauteed, but I put spices so it's not so boring or whatever, right?
Potato-like. And then, what's this, garlic
Because
here?
it's always better when you fry them in oil, right? But
Absolutely. Something fry them
but,
with something.
So if you're not using oil, if you're using water instead to try to be healthier, well, it's better to put some spices or something.
And then garlic for health reasons and things like that.
Garlic makes everything taste better. Not everything, but a lot of things.
And it's recommended. Well, almost anything. I don't recommend an ice cream, but
I wouldn't have bought this, but it was very cheap. I think 87 cents a container.
It's got a nice
it does have a cute
logo.
picture, but it's
even upside down
sweet.
on it. It's great. Yeah.
But we were eating it as salad dressing, and it worked really well as salad dressing. So
no,
that's
it's
very versatile.
supposed to be for what? Really, this
like
this for stir fries.
Stir fry sort of deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It looks as though you can put it on almost anything. It tastes as though. That's the important thing. Except I don't recommend it on ice cream again. But.
No. Anyway, Law and Order. So I really like I guess that's Jerry Orbach. I think so. The
young pup there?
No.
That's
Benjamin Bratt.
The guy who looks like he stepped right out of the 50s.
Yeah, he's great. Lenny. Can't remember what his name is.
He's got a kind of like a New York accent. Kind of
Briscoe.
guy.
Lenny Briscoe.
I
was hoping it was on the back of the box, but it's not. They have the real names on the back of the box. But anyway, I think it's Briscoe, Lenny Briscoe. I like him the most. And James and I both dislike the guy who's the boss of the two lawyers.
Yep.
The most. We don't like him.
Well, I can't stand it, but it's a realistic kind of character. This smart, buttocked young guy, detective. It's pretty realistic. You don't know about the hairstyle. But,
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys who, even 30 years ago in cops who are starting to get university educations, not just the standard college education.
And then they seem a little arrogant.
Well, they really think they know everything. And the sad thing is, it's probably better that they've got a university education, but it's a long ways from having a bachelor's. And a bachelor degree in criminal justice, who got that, would be about the lowest thing going, way lower than
Kinesiology?
Education. Lower than kinesiology, yeah.
Really? I find that hard to believe.
Well,
anyway.
I've dealt with people in criminal justice, and I've dealt with kinesiology majors. So.
Okay. Very entertaining season. I like how they set up the show. I was explaining earlier how sometimes it's half and half. The police work the first half and then the lawyers work the second half. But it really depends on the story. If there's more of a story for the police officers, well, they get a bigger portion. And if there's less of a story, they get a very small portion of the episode. It just depends on the episode. So for people who like the lawyer side more, well, they still watch, right? Even if it's a little, even if the lawyers don't get that big of a part of the show. And if people like the police work more, well, they still watch the whole episode. So it's great for both people.
Yeah, the way I look at the police work is all the shows up to this point in time have basically been about that. Yeah. Now this shows the implications of what follows.
Yeah.
That's one of the weak things about shows like 48 Hours and Cops. They just show people being caught. It doesn't show what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the time, people end up getting off and you're like, no, how can this happen? But it happens. And
the sad thing is, it's not the fault of the legal system or the people making the laws and stuff like that. It's the fault of dictators. Dictators there's no law. La loi c'est moi. Is that what l'état c'est moi was what Louis XIV said, but he might as well have said la loi c'est moi. The law, it's me.
So.
And you've got to have protections for people who are innocent. Otherwise, half the people that end up in jails, dictatorships, standard dictatorships, end up being political prisoners.
Well, anyway, there were some episodes that I thought they were a little bit too political. Speaking of politics in this, I don't care for that. When they have judgments about it. There was one episode where there was a guy, he was in a medical trial. He was a schizophrenic who was taking some experimental drug, and
to help him out with the
schizophrenia. And he was doing really well for the first while, and then ended up killing somebody. Spoiler alert. And he's not held responsible, right? Because of his medical condition, which turned out not to be schizophrenia, but he still wasn't held responsible. And they were saying, well, you're not to blame or whatever. Well, what protection do people have from people who are schizophrenic that go around killing people? Whether they're responsible or not, somebody has to be responsible for them. If they are not responsible for their own actions, then somebody else has to be. And if, as it turns out in this episode, it was a very good episode. There was a lot more to see with it, and I won't get into that because it's worth watching. But people have to talk about the problems with people getting off due to mental illness. not being responsible for their actions. And the problem with police shooting people who, oh, he's schizophrenic, you shouldn't have shot him. Oh. Well,
In
if
many
they're
cases, how are the police
violent,
supposed to
how are
know?
the police supposed? Well, yeah, how are they supposed to know that, for one thing? And how are they supposed to respond if there's a violent person who's acting violently, threatening other people? What are they supposed to do? You call them in. What do you want them to do? It's they have to protect people. So
One of the problems is they've got, they tend to now, it's been this way in Lethbridge for quite a while, maybe almost a generation, unite dispatch for ambulances, for police, I don't know, fire, maybe, into one dispatch unit. Probably trying to save money. But, so a call comes in, and a person will be saying, well, someone's got a knife, could you send out a psych team, like with straitjacket, all that sort of stuff. How's the dispatcher actually going to know? The dispatcher's not there. The dispatchers I ran across weren't that stupid, but they weren't that smart either. The people phoning in, they might not know the person. There's a guy wandering around the streets of Lethbridge with a big knife. Someone that they don't know. What are you supposed to do? There was someone who probably never be invited back on the CBC again a while back. It was around 2020 when there were a lot of issues about people committing suicide by cop and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think the CBC had ever want him again. He was a person who worked, something like I don't know what the term is now, but mental institution. And he said, I've been injured many times by people who, too many times probably, by people who I've been trying to restrain. And he said, I think he said something like, there are cases where I called in the cops. And they shouldn't be, are they supposed to be wearing flak jackets? I'd demand it if I were in a union for people taking care of people in a psychiatric institution, or whatever they call it, mental institution.
Well, if they're dangerous. I mean, not all of them.
If I were, I don't know what they do. If I were in a wing where people were dangerous to themselves and not to other people, I wouldn't be worried about that. But if I were in a place where they were putting people together, and they shouldn't, but particularly where there are people who are violent, I want as much protection as possible. Go on. You have more things to say.
I do.
Yep.
And I don't know if you find what I have to say offensive, please speak up. James's sister was schizophrenic.
Yes, she was. And, I have a sibling who said, I used to believe that...
you might want to try the asparagus before you put the sauce on it, because I cooked the asparagus in the... It's pretty tasty.
Mental institutions were worse than useless, kind of like punishment. But after he saw what happened to my sister, he realized that he was thinking, I guess, that insanity or whatever was a social construct. And then he saw what happened to my sister, and he realized, I guess it took him quite a while, he realized that she wanted to commit suicide often. And she had delusions about a doctor who's an old doctor in Africa. When we were in Africa, he was a skunk. He'd turn up at this one mission. My parents had nothing to do with the actual management of the mission. They were just teachers there. Or I think my dad might have been just teaching. Mom was having kids and stuff like that.
was I born with that mission? No. But I think I was alive when they went that mission. Just don't remember. But the doctor liked doing just too frequently rectal examinations on kids at the orphanage. And my sister, decades later, the guy was old then. That would be in the late 50s, early 60s at the latest. And like decades later, so he was old then. Decades later, she was worried that he'd made it all the way to Canada, was coming for her and stuff like that. And she'd be, when she was having a bad time of it, she'd lose control of her bowel functions, she was so afraid. What do you do about that? I don't think she was a danger to anyone, but she was a danger to herself. So I don't know what all sorts of treatments she went through and things like that, but there are certain demonstrable or evident, relatively evident symptoms that come with schizophrenia. For example, the hippocampus just shrivels up like a prune. Ordinarily it looks like a plum, different shape, but it just shrivels up. And it might happen with other things, but it's actually a physical disease that has mental consequences. It has symptoms that have to do with mental function and stuff like that. It looks as though there's a strong genetic component. Maybe it's almost entirely genetic. There might be certain things that trigger the genes and so on and so forth. But guys in particular with schizophrenia tend, I'm not saying all do, but tend to have trouble staying on their meds. And guys seem to have a slightly different chemical system, slightly different brain wiring and stuff like that. And oftentimes they react to fear. Like, what was your reaction? What would your reaction have been way back when someone was threatening to kill you? What were you saying?
Oh, in my dreams?
Yeah.
I used to have nightmares just about every night. And in all of them, running and hiding, all the time.
So now, my reaction to a bad dream, and I've rarely had them, and still rarely have them, but would be run. Because I used to be able to outrun anything, really.
I couldn't.
Easily have been hit.
So.
Pauline is maybe slightly knock-kneed and stuff like that. So, just not built to be a great athlete, at least in terms of running. Now, once Pauline and I became an item, when I had a bad dream, and when someone was going after Pauline, I didn't run. I knew she wouldn't be able to run, and I would kill whatever was going after her. Slightly different brain wiring, perhaps, and I'm not an aggressive guy at all. I'd be the kind of guy who almost invariably would win most gentlemanly players in whatever sports activity. Most gentlemen play in whatever sports activity I was. But I guess I don't know what my reaction would be in real life, but I like to think if Pauline's life were threatened, that I would protect her. And that's the only. If you can't run away, you've got to stand up for yourself.
But what I'm saying is, if a person is not responsible for their own actions and they are potentially violent and threatening of other people, then somebody has to be responsible for their actions. So it could be a family member or several family members that agree to yes, I will care for this person and I'll be responsible for them and whatever. Or it could, if nobody will do it, then the system must be. But if the system is, well, you can't possibly have people assigned to this person to make sure that they're able to wander around in public and do whatever. They'd have to be in a group home sort of setting, away from other people, or in this system somehow where they aren't a threat to other people. But if a family member is willing to accept the responsibility, then if they are negligent in controlling the person that they have signed off, agreed to care for and be responsible for, then they should be charged if that person hurts or kills or whatever, does something to some other person. Somebody needs to be held accountable, because you can't possibly have a system where some people are above the law and are not responsible for their actions, but they're allowed to go on killing people because they're not responsible for their actions.
Or
That
threatening
doesn't
people
make sense.
and then escalating to killing someone.
So the system has to change. Somebody has to be responsible. That's all I have to say about it. You might find it offensive, whatever. The show's good. I was going to mention Asparagus. In the first disc of this, Professor Kevin Ahern he explains why asparagus is very important for people who are ketogenic, people who are on or just on a low carb diet. So I don't remember what that was,
No.
but you can find that in the first
Try
disc.
to watch that
And,
to see what it's about.
And anyway, I mean, asparagus is great for anybody. It's cheap right now. This came in from Mexico.
Good stuff.
Eat lots. We've been eating
Don't eat American if
three
at all
bunches
possible.
of asparagus every day, the two of us. It's great. There's many ways to make it. Taco seasoning,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, I
We found that recently.
you're right, I didn't need to.
Yeah. And, why bother? Why put extra sugar on or whatever? Why put any sugar on if you can eat it like that? So that's no sugar, no fat cooked on that.
Good stuff.
And it's good. So, Blue Skies. Who doesn't love Big Crosby?
Well, I didn't when I was a kid. That's because my mom, that was her heartthrob when she was a kid. Bing Crosby. The equivalent of Frank Sinatra or the Beatles or Michael Jackson or whatever.
Now, the story is, I didn't really care for it so much. It's kind of weird. You watch the show and the only interpretation you can get out of the end of the show is woman ends up with both guys. Very different kind of show.
Sounds like Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah.
Hung with
But
Jean-Paul
because
Sartre
the
all her
one
life.
guy, he can't stick to one thing. Like she was in love with him. She wants to have a family with him and everything, and he probably really wants to too, but he's just not that kind of person. He can't stick around, right? He does something and then he's on to the next thing, and then he's on to the next thing, right? And so
There are people like that.
yeah, but
Hard
she
to live
still
with
loves
this.
him, right? And his best friend, who's also in love with the woman, he loves his best friend too, right? So yeah, interesting kind of story. Blue Skies. You get a lot of great hits out of it. And not all the songs were good, but a lot were, so why not watch it? Poirot, Hickory Dickory Dock. This is maybe my least favorite Poirot so far. It's really not very good. It's still David Suchet or Suchet, I don't know, however you say it. It's
Suchet, bro.
so he does a great job. How can you not like watching him as Poirot? Honestly, I think
looks like Poirot.
what they should do is, while he's still alive, is they should just make up a whole bunch of Agatha Christie Poirot-like stories. They could even give him a different name. that's, you know, enough like Poirot that they could get away with it or whatever, and
That's an
just
idea.
pump out a whole bunch of shows, because he's perfect for the role. We love watching him as Poirot.
He looks
May
like
as
the
well.
way I always pictured him from Christine Halls.
Yeah. So you have 4 minutes almost to talk about whatever you want. Enjoy. So it looks like you're going to talk about Ulysses S. Grant.
Again,
eh?
yeah.
All right.
Not that I've talked about it much. Just a little bit at a time. Our half hour. Sorry, the sauce is a little hot. I was mentioning that this guy's one of the greatest generals of all history because he wasn't a king. He eventually became leader. Not a very good leader, not a very good president. Maybe from 1873 to 1879. Somewhere. But he, like George Washington, after 8 years, called it quits. That's what leaders should do. Especially, or if they're military leaders, the temptation, of course, is for a military leader to set up a dictatorship. Almost every successful military leader in history either was a dictator before or a dictator after. Being a great general, and of course, many were dictators all the way through their generalship. Napoleon was not exactly a dictator before he started his career, but he eventually might have started in 1794, maybe, the end of the French Revolution. He put an end to it, but he continued it and set up what happened in ancient Greece oftentimes when they got rid of a monarch. A tyranny was set up. So on the way to the French Revolution, not this guy, but Napoleon was the guy who set up the tyranny. I think it was 1899. No, 1799, I think. 1799. 1794, I think it was. I was saying 1894. 1794 is maybe when the revolution ended with a little whiff of grape shot. Compliments from Napoleon. But this guy, when I was a kid, they were describing him as a butcher, Ulysses S. Grant. And there were lots of lives sacrificed under his generalship. Stomping out a horrible regime in the southern part of the United States. Based on slavery, it really was based on slavery. A small number of slave owners, maybe 384,000, out of a white population of 8 million. And many of these slave owners, plantation owners, were the military leaders for the Confederate States of America. And they were